Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this beautiful floral piece and the technique involved. I'm also going to show you how to remove a portion of the center so that you can add a name, a phrase, or your 2023 word of the year. For this project, I'm using 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, my Winsor & Newton professional tube paints that I have let dry in my palette, a mop brush and round brush from Polina Bright, water, a very used paper towel, a very loved, masking fluid, and masking tape. And all of the links for everything will be in the description below. So the first thing we're going to do is tape our paper off around the edges. It keeps our paper still on our work surface, but it also gives us a nice clean edge when we pull the tape off at the very end. But most importantly, because we're using so much paint and water in this project, as the paper warps with the painting and the heaviness of the water, the tape will keep it still, and as it completely dries, the warping will be gone. So for this center area, I just used a piece of tape. I ended up moving it around because it wasn't centered. And to get the nice clean edge, I used an X-Acto knife, but you could use scissors, or you could just leave the edges raw and make it look like it was a piece of tape in the middle. That might be cool. So now we get to put the paint on our paper, and the colors I'm using for this project are Opera Rose, Winsor Orange, Winsor Yellow, and Sap Green. So I'm really just placing the colors randomly onto the paper, and my whole goal is to have different gradients. So contrast is the key with this technique. So I want some areas that are super light. So I am going to be adding a lot of water to get that washed out look. And then I want some areas to be more dark. I also want some areas to have kind of a little pattern, to have a harder edge. And then I can lead up to that with some softer, more watery washes. So I think in the end, you'll see it looks really cool that some of these areas are going to have that hardness and softness. I didn't want the whole thing to be just gradients of color doing wet on wet. So this is wet on dry. The paper is totally dry. And I am just really going with the flow, placing paint down where it makes me happy. I'm trying to spread things out and make them look visually appealing to me. So as I'm painting along, I'll notice, oh, I haven't done green in a while, and I will add green. And I'm knowing that later on, the green will be kind of a leafy moment, a leaf area. So I'm kind of shaping those in maybe more pointed directions, if that makes sense. Having longer areas with the green, more rounded areas with the orange and the yellow, knowing that those will be more flowers. But I'm not afraid also of doing leafy shapes in the pink and yellow and all of that. So anyway, it's really random, and all you really need to do is just fill the entire paper with your colors, making sure to go right up to the masking fluid so that when we remove the masking fluid, we will see a hard line and there won't be a lot of gaps of white, so that it looks nice and clean that way. I like when the colors blend together, so you'll notice that on my palette, I'm not really making sure to clean things off or have things have their own mixing spot. That is how I paint. It's not for everybody. I love color mixing, and I haven't really been good in the past about showing my palette, and so I'm trying to be better at it, even though it might turn some of you off the way that I do things. But I already figured that things are mixing on the paper anyway, and I want them to mix. I want soft gradients in some areas and really hard lines in other areas. So I just really want the contrast of light and dark, hard and soft, and lots of different colors all over the place for this first layer. And I know some of you want to see the entire process, so I'm going to show most of the process, a little bit of it sped up for each layer. So if you want to stick around and watch it, or if you want to skip through to the next part, I'm really just going to be doing this same thing for a little bit longer. Now you're going to want to make sure everything is very, very dry before we put our masking fluid on. Now the trick to using a really nice brush when using masking fluid is to really rub some dish soap into the bristles. Then you can use your masking fluid and it comes right off your brush and it is not ruined. Now the reason that's important to me is because when I'm doing this type of technique, I want really beautiful marks that I'm making with the masking fluid. And so it's important to me to use a really nice brush that's going to give me those beautiful marks, because you'll see at the end how beautiful it looks when the masking fluid comes off. So I've just poured a little bit of masking fluid into the lid so that I have a easier way to access it. It's kind of hard to get into that bottle with the long brush. And so I'm just making shapes all around the paper. And you just need to keep in mind that everything that you're masking off is going to be this bright, lighter color gradient that we have on our paper when we take it off at the end. So I'm making flower shapes, I'm making leaf shapes, anything that I want to be kind of bright and highlighted when we take everything off at the end. And just as a reminder about masking fluid, when we paint over it after it's dry, everything will stay this exact color. So we're in essence saving this lighter color from getting paint on it as we continue forward with our other layers. So I do want quite a bit of this lighter, bright wash coming through. And so I'm splattering the paper, I'm making shapes all over the paper, but I'm keeping in mind that I do want to do a second layer of masking fluid. And so I'm not covering the paper, but I would say I'm spreading it out a good deal and doing a lot of it. So we are going to be doing a second layer of masking fluid over a medium wash later. So we do want some areas saved for that. So as you can see, it's all over the paper, but it's pretty spread out. So just keeping in mind where you want your lighter shapes to end up when we're done at the end of the project. Don't forget that the masking fluid has to completely dry before we can paint over the top of it. So now we are starting our second layer of paint. And I'm using the same exact colors, but I want them to be brighter. So it's a little bit more washed out, that first layer. Now we get to do a little bit more punchy colors, using them more full force with less water. And I'm staying in kind of the same color areas. So where I've done yellow, I'm doing some yellow, and where I've done pink, I'm doing pink, and making those colors brighter and punchier. But I'm also letting some areas overlap because that will look really cool. So letting the yellow go on the green go on the pink, colors that weren't there before but will look really cool once the masking fluid has been taken off. One of the keys to this process is to really make sure that everything that has masking fluid on it is outlined in this new layer of paint. So the only way it will look like there's different layers when we take the masking fluid off is if the new colors completely engulf the masking fluid, or else our shapes will not look totally preserved. We won't have an exact shape of a leaf because the leaf wasn't totally outlined in the new color. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you can visualize that. So I'm just really, for this layer, making random shapes, just trying to fill in around the masking fluid. So I'm doing some lines, some leafy shapes, some, bubbly floral shapes. And again, this will all make sense at the end why I'm doing this. So each layer has its own purpose. This is where we get to put in a lot of the texture, a lot of the fun, keeping everything really bright, concentrated, punchy, not really worrying too much if things overlap, like I said, because that will look really cool later on, and having a lot of fun with the shapes. And again, you can totally watch me do this whole process with all of these colors on this second layer, or you can speed through and watch the next part if you already grasp this process. But I know a lot of people really love watching everything in real time so they can completely grasp how I did it. And I'll speed up in a little bit here too, just for time's sake. Okay, and once again, we need to let that completely dry before we put the masking fluid on. And the reason that we need to do that is because the masking fluid will actually peel up the paint and peel the paper if it's not completely dry before it's applied. So, paper needs to be very, 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 very dry, and now we can put our masking fluid on. And this layer of masking fluid, we need to kind of look at an angle at our paper and see where did we put masking fluid before and where are we going to put the masking fluid now. We want some of our masking fluid to overlap some of the layers that we had before with masking fluid because it will create a nice layered look. But we also want a lot of the details and a lot of the extra leaves or flowers to really shine through in this layer. So we don't want to completely fill the page with the second layer of masking fluid. We still want some areas where we're going to have just paint shine through for the next layer, but we do want to fill in a lot of the gaps that we had before that we left for this second layer specifically. So we're really filling in the page, making sure we're overlapping some, not completely filling every inch with masking fluid, but putting enough that it's going to look full and vibrant and full of flowers. Now that our last layer of masking fluid has dried, we get to do our very last layer of paint. Now this last layer has to be a lot darker than the previous layer of paint so that the previous layer of paint stands out once the masking fluid has been removed. So we are doing muted colors, darker colors. I'm adding just the tiniest bit of blue to the greens to make them really pop. Also adding this green to the pink is going to make it nice and dark and muted as well. So I'm really letting everything mix together and just be super duper dark. This layer is not about shapes. It's not about texture. It's about just filling the entire page with color. So again, I'm staying kind of in the color area that I had already put down before, but I am totally fine with everything overlapping because you'll see at the end, it looks so good. But this layer is just really about putting down a lot of color, lots of dark color, letting everything blend together and keeping it nice and dark and full and just really filling in all of the spaces all over the masking fluid. Now that everything is completely dry, it is time for the best part of the project, and that is removing the masking fluid, because now we get to reveal all those beautiful layers and everything we worked so hard to do this whole time. I like to just use my finger. You can use any material on the market that is made for removing masking fluid, an eraser or things like that. I just find it's easier to use my finger and pull it off as I go. And can you just imagine how excited I was as I was taking this off? And then I just wanted to show you the halfway mark of how it looks with the masking fluid on versus how it's starting to look as it's revealed. And it's just so satisfying to remove masking fluid, but to see those light washes coming through, just pretty much my favorite thing about using masking fluid with watercolor. This is also where we get to remove the tape from the center and reveal that nice bright white area where we get to write whatever we want, a name or a mantra. I am again doing my word for the year of 2023, which is connection, but I'll show you how I write that later. But now I'm just adding a little bit of light color for contrast onto some of those white flowery spots just to make them not so stark. And then I'm going through with dark colors in certain areas. So I'm choosing like a dark green. I'm going to also do a dark orange and a dark pink, just to give some overlapping details, some really dark contrasting areas within the darker areas. This just adds so much depth and so much texture, because once we remove the masking fluid and we have those light areas, sometimes it can look really flat, like really like this is the top layer, you know? And so if we add a slightly dark contrasting color layering over the top of the lighter colors, it just really makes everything pop and look like a very finished piece. And now we get to do the edge tape reveal, which is also a very satisfying part of this process. But by taping it down, I hope you can see how flat and unwarped our paper turned out to be, because it was able to dry being taped down. Also, if you have a block of paper, that would work really well too. So I am not a master calligrapher. That's something that I want to work on to be better at, but I did write my word for the year, which is connection. Connection to self, connection to my family, connection to my community, just something that will drive me to remember what my goals are for this year that I can look at and stay inspired. And I hope this tutorial inspired you, not only to paint this painting, but also to choose a word for this year. I'll see you guys next time.